Aizawa lingered in the teacher's lounge as he waited. It was unlike him. He would have gone home as soon as his students left for the day. Today was different. He was waiting for your name. He'd seen her over the past week between classes, but he hadn't shown up at her door again, and aside from them communicating for an undercover mission 3 days ago, they hadn't spoken. It wasn't that he didn't want to talk to her, but what she'd said to him had been playing through his mind. He knew she wasn't that teenager from 10 years ago, and after she graduated, she spent almost 7 years working abroad at different agencies, helping them run smoother, implement better policies, something she'd been passionate about even during her time at UA. When he seen her for the first time after she returned, Aizawa couldn't help the response his body had to her. It had startled him, and he'd done his damnedest to stay away, but ultimately failed. He couldn't overlook the fact that he taught her, and so his excuse of being hurt to see her had come into play. An excuse he shouldn't need because at his age, he should have been able to be honest. It wasn't like anyone could condemn him for what he felt, for wanting her. Regardless of her being 11 years his junior, she was an adult and that was all that mattered. And yet, he hadn't been able to get the possible looks and words of others out of his head. How those who knew they'd been teacher and student would react, and how those who didn't would have an opinion on the age difference. All of that had constantly run through his mind, but it wasn't himself he was worried about in those hypothetical scenarios. It was her. Things seldom faced Aizawa, but he didn't want to put her in an uncomfortable position. That, and his inability to reconcile his own feelings, had turned her into a secret, when he should have been announcing to the world that he, nonchalant Aizawa Shota, had fallen in love. Despite still working to remind himself that what he was doing wasn't wrong, he wasn't foolish enough to allow things to stay the same because the end result was her leaving him, and he couldn't have that. He sighed, glancing down at the empty coffee cup. He debated whether to make himself another, but decided against it. Footsteps approaching the teacher's lounge caught his attention. The door opened, and Your Name walked in with a couple of other staff members who had started in the last year or two. Aizawa-san, it's unusual to see you still here when the kids have left, Toru stated. Aizawa glanced at the young man before his eyes went back to Your Name. I was waiting to see if you wanted to have dinner with me. Dinner sounds good. How nice of you, Aizawa-san, Yoko replied with a smile. It isn't a group date I'm interested in. I'm asking Your Name. Will you have dinner with me? The two bystanders looked between them, and he felt like he was waiting with bated breath for her answer, because while he didn't think she would turn him down, she very well could. Yes, I'll have dinner with you. Aizawa felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Okay, I'll pick you up at 7. He glanced at his watch. It was almost 4:30. 7 works. He nodded before putting the coffee cup in the sink, exiting the room, and heading to his apartment in the faculty dorms. Aizawa would take her to her favorite restaurant, and now that he was done being held back by unfounded doubts and hypothetical expectations of others, they could discuss what she expected of him, their future together. Once in his apartment, he went straight to his bedroom and to the closet. They weren't going anywhere fancy, but it was technically their first official date. Sure, they'd gone out before to little dives where they wouldn't be recognized, but tonight was different. He stuck to his signature black pants, a black button-up, and boots. With that out of the way, he showered and then found himself waiting. Aizawa wished she'd chosen an earlier time. Even an hour earlier would have worked. He wouldn't have been sitting there anxiously, like some schoolboy waiting to go on his first date. However, he wanted to give her enough time to get ready. Time seemed to have slowed to a snail's pace, and by the time 6:30 rolled around, Aizawa was heading out of his apartment quickly, as if it had been holding him hostage. Your Name didn't live in the faculty dorms, since she only taught 3 days a week and worked for an agency the rest of the time. She'd chosen a place halfway between both occupations. He stopped at a flower stand on his way. He knew little about them, but figured he couldn't go wrong with the classic red roses and bought a dozen. Aizawa arrived a few minutes early at her door and knocked. As he waited, he realized it was the first time he'd been there without the need for an excuse. When she opened the door, his eyes drifted over her. She wore a lilac sundress that he so often enjoyed seeing her in at school. Hi, Shota. Hello, kitten. You look beautiful. He held the flowers out to her. These are for you. Thank you. She brought them to her nose and inhaled. Come in. I'll put them in water and then we can go. Aizawa followed her into the kitchen, where she put the flowers in a vase before placing them on the table in the living room. All set? He asked. She nodded, and they exited the house, stopping long enough for her to lock the door. Where are we going? She asked. Tsubaki House, he responded. She smiled at him, and Aizawa held his hand out to her. She looked at it for a brief moment, another first for them, a physical connection for anyone watching to see. Your Name slipped her hand in his, and they headed towards the restaurant. Aizawa enjoyed the display of openness that hadn't been there before, and he mentally kicked himself for waiting so long, for holding back. But now there would be no more of that. Tonight, they would talk everything out, and their relationship would no longer stay behind closed doors.